year at the conference, we have one or two fan favorite speakers. And Sarah Fisher is one of those. I think Sarah has spoken probably at 9 conferences, maybe all of them. I don't know. I don't remember, but I'm going to ask her. She is my guest today on the podcast. And if you've never heard her speak, well, now here's your chance. Because each time she does a presentation, it blows my mind and I learn 500 new things. I absolutely love her. And so it's a very special treat to have her here on the podcast. But welcome, Sarah. I'm so glad that you can join us.
Thank you, Victoria. And thank you for inviting me to be a part of the DBC again, because it's absolutely my favourite event of the year.
Well, we're really glad that you can talk this year because, again, every single time students hear you, there's just so much more vital information that you impart. But for those of you who've never heard of Sarah Fisher, well, then you've been living under a rock. But she is a canine and equine behavior advisor and educator. She's worked with animals for over 20 years and is the founder of Animal-Centered Education, also known as ACE. And she teaches courses, ACE courses for trainers, groomers, veterinary nurses, physiotherapists, and animal behavior counselors who wish to broaden their expertise by learning detailed observations combined with what she calls ACE free work, body work, and ACE techniques. And the interesting thing about this, it's that this has also been inspired by the animals that she's worked with throughout her career, as well as other professionals working in the fields of animal welfare, education, and behavior. As I said, she speaks all around the world, and she's been on quite a few television shows, and most recently, Nightmare Pets SOS for BBC One. And I love all the photos she posts of the donkeys and the horses and, of course, her dogs at Tilly Farm. So I just, Sarah, where do you find the time to do all of this?
Well, thank you very much for that introduction. I think I'm just really lucky, Vicky, to spend time in the company of animals, but also to connect with amazing people like you, because you are so generous in what you do to bring people together for the benefit of dogs and people that love them. So I feel very blessed to be a part of the DBC, as I said at the beginning. And I think it's just a passion for really helping people rethink a lot about the way we educate animals and maybe sort of reconsider some of their existing beliefs, because the more I watch animals, the more I see things that we either didn't register before or overlooked, or patterns of behavior that make me really rethink how we might not be recognizing some really important details that can really enhance the learning experience, both for the animal and the person. So I feel really lucky that I spend probably a great part of my day just watching. I have an extraordinary life, as do you. And I just think it's a joy, therefore it never feels like hard work to be able to gather that information and share it with the world, but also not be frightened to revisit some of the stuff that we might have shared before and say, do you know what? I'm seeing this through a different lens, or I found more detail, or I wondered what the correlation was, and I might have not considered all the relevant parts before. So I think I'm very lucky in that I just really love to learn and to keep revisiting my own beliefs as well.
Now, for people who don't know about animal-centered education, can you, in a nutshell, explain exactly what it entails? What is ACE?
That's a really hard
And what's
question.
ACE free work? Talk about both.
I will. Thank you. It's a really hard question. So essentially, animal-centered education is what the name suggests. The animal is at the heart of their learning experience. And I really wanted to create a learning environment that really helped people to stand back watch more and do less. And one of the things that I started to explore many, many years ago was the inclusion of more sensory learning experiences, because I was very lucky to be involved with Battersea Dogs and Cats Home. That's our oldest shelter and probably most famous shelter here in the UK, supporting some of the dogs that were really struggling in kennels over 27 years ago. So I've probably been working with animals, connecting with animals for almost 30 years now. And a lot of those young dogs found the world overwhelming, their whole world had changed, but also maybe some of them were born with sensory sensitivities that made it really difficult for their first guardians to help them live successfully and peacefully in the human world, just due to lack of experience, lack of knowledge, maybe the wrong environment. And I had some of those youngsters on foster with me at Tilly Farm. And sort of at that time, I suppose the messaging really was, if a dog's struggling, teach them more, train more, do more. And that didn't feel right for me. It didn't feel right for the youngsters that were struggling. I could see so many small elements of how these youngsters were struggling that I was able to break it right down and really start to isolate where the disruption in the nervous system would start. So I looked outside the canine world to be inspired by the work of a lady called Jean Ayres. And she coined the phrase sensory integration, was using a lot of sensory engagements to help support children and adults with learning struggles. And that was a real light bulb moment for me. So my original background actually was human massage and anatomy and physiology. So I have a great love for human learning as well and human behavior. And it all made sense to me that we would actually adopt a similar approach for young dogs that were starting out in life with lots of challenges, that we would also employ to support children. And that was a game changer. So these youngsters really helped me learn the value of sensory education. I really started to look at canine learning through different eyes. And that really was the start of what I now call ACE-free work, where we really were exploring how we could expand a dog's learning experiences by providing a lot of sensory engagements that would be a natural part of learning, maybe outside of a domestic home, but maybe that weren't accessible to dogs because of the environment they were in, their age, lots of different reasons. And that's how ACE-free work was born. And I do say it's been shaped by dogs for dogs. And I started to just include more and more things like snuffle mats and things that made noise, but the dog had control over whether they engaged with that item that made a noise or not. And it's expanded into this incredible learning environment. And I'm very lucky to share it with students around the world. And I'm including a lot of our learning experiences in the talk for DBC, because the more I see, the more I just look back at some of my early experiences, and we had good outcomes, but I also kind of want to say to the dogs, sorry, I know I probably missed a lot. I could have made that learning experience even easier for you.
I know exactly how you feel. I mean, a lot of my stuff has been recorded, and so I look back on that and go, aha, like I really wish that I had done that differently. I was doing sort of, the best, or we sort of only had like the relative science that I was following, and the cognitive science as well as behavioral science, following that as much as possible. But things change and things develop and things expand. And so, where we are today is very different from where we are 10 years or where we were 10 years ago or even 20 years ago. And I know that, you and I have been working at this for quite a long time. And, but the key to really your work is observation, isn't it? And I remember a drama teacher of mine, and he was teaching street theater.
Oh, wow.
And he said to us, he was like, one of the things he said is that, he two phrases. do less and just be. And I've never forgotten that. And it seems like in free work from, what I've learned from you, that just taking a step back and observing the dog will give you so much information and will show you so many things that you've missed or didn't understand or misinterpreted.
That's such beautiful advice from your tutor. And it's true. I think we obviously want to help animals, and I think we probably are raised in a culture where success is determined by how much we achieve or do, and therefore we kind of apply that enthusiasm, shall we say, to the education and support of the animals that we love. But what's been absolutely extraordinary is, just briefly to explain a bit of free work, so we put out sort of sensory items I call stations, but we raise them to suit and meet the needs of each individual dog. And that was something that I recognised, again, just from watching dogs, that people a long time ago who were coming for one-to-one sessions at Tilly Farm, excuse me, might say, oh, my dog's not going to be interested in the stuff you've put out to help the dog engage with stuff and settle into this new environment while we're talking, because I've offered my dog games and snuffle mats and the dog's not shown any interest at all. But when I would watch the movement of the dog and I'd listen to the footfall and I'd watch the slide of a limb maybe where the dog didn't have connection through the body and stability, I could see that actually the dog couldn't access something from the ground. So I'd raise whatever item that was. I was using like a version of licking mats long before they were made as a useful addition to our life with our pets. So I'd raise these items to help the dog access them in a more physically comfortable way. And suddenly their dogs were really engaged in early form of licking mats and snuffle mats and things like that, much to the amazement of the guardians. And it wasn't that the dogs weren't interested, that they weren't either physically or emotionally comfortable enough to access whatever amazing items were being offered to them when they were only on the ground. And what was amazing was listening to the sound of the footfall change when a dog was able to access, let's say, a snuffle mat on a low stool and then walk in balance to maybe another snuffle mat on a stool a little distance from the one that actually helped them find that balance and freedom of movement. So it's been a real extension of that. And seeing these patterns change has been extraordinary. And when we allow that dog freedom of movement, because if possible, we take collars and harnesses off, we start to see really clear patterns in the way they like to explore a new environment. We find really clear patterns in their learning preferences. And there are really clear patterns in how dogs greet people, and also what they do in terms of engagements with us when they actually are in need of a break. And that can be so easily misinterpreted as, oh, my dog wants to do more. My dog wants to train more or learn more. And actually, what I've recognised over the last few years in particular is that actually the dogs are defaulting, in my interpretation, and bear in mind this is only my interpretation, to a previously learned behaviour and a previously learned pattern of movement that has been so well practiced it now doesn't need any thinking. And when we see dogs go into these default patterns, the question for me is, are we asking for too much? Are we asking them to stay engaged for too long? Or is there something in the environment that's disruptive to them, or in their own internal environment that's disruptive? And have they gone into these previously very well practiced behaviours, whatever they might be, leg weaves, coming to the middle, whatever it is that they seem to be asking to do? Are they actually seeking those because they now need to kind of have that zone out and process other things that are new to them in the environment that we're in together, if that makes sense? And it's things like that
It
that have been
does.
so eye-opening for me, and really does make me look back and go, I'm really sorry. We had good outcomes, that maybe we could have had more peaceful outcomes for you internally. And I just didn't recognize those incredible details that are so evident when you start being aware of them. And I could have probably, helped dogs find that peaceful environment more quickly. We still obviously have had good outcomes, Vicky, but I think I tell all my students, our ACE courses come with a health warning. You will feel guilty. You will look back. You will discover you have missed stuff. And I call them mistakes, MISSTAKES. It's just because we missed stuff. And I really think about these kind of default behaviors too, in terms of specific breed type behaviors. Because again, if the dogs are defaulting to like specific breed behaviors, we have to ask why. We can't just say that dog's doing that because he's a border collie, or the dog's just doing that because she's a bull breed, or, well, of course the dog does that because that dog's a Maremma, or, oh, well, all terriers skip on one leg because that's what terriers do. We have to say, but why? Why am I seeing it? What's the frequency of these patterns that I'm observing? What might be missing from that dog's life that means that they have to engage in default non-thinking behaviors so frequently and with such intensity? So it's not that we're not going to see breed-specific behaviors, but when we do, we need to think a little more and look a little more deeply. So one thing for me that really brought this home is we have a donkey called Mabel who lives at the farm with her mother Dora. And donkeys really enjoy a dust bath. They originate from Africa, and they really enjoy rolling in dust rather than mud. Horses roll in mud. And when Mabel was growing up at the farm, she, like all dogs, was finding it really difficult as her balance was changing through rapid growth spurts to walk in balance and to walk by our side. It was really difficult for her. So we understand that, we recognise that. But what was really interesting with Mabel is that out of all our donkeys, we have 6 in total, she was the donkey that had the need to roll in dust more regularly than any of our other donkeys. So if she'd been out in pasture browsing hedgerows and there hadn't been any access to dust, she would become almost agitated. And of course, we recognise that and immediately gave her access to the barns that have got the dust in. And I was thinking, gosh, can you imagine having this desperate need to engage in a natural behaviour, but you don't have access to that, and now someone's asking you to learn a really difficult skill, which is walk in balance by the side of a human at that human's pace, when your body and your brain are changing so rapidly. And that really did add another layer to what needs aren't we meeting when we're asking our dogs to learn so much in order to live peacefully in the world that we've created for them. And I think free work enables us to meet those needs and to have that as a foundation for all learning, and to recognize what needs we might have overlooked, including, are our animals comfortable? Is that terrier really only skipping because that is a commonly observed posture with a terrier, or actually, as is normally true, is that terrier skipping because most terriers have luxating patella, which is what creates that skip in that left or right hind leg. And it just, as I said, the more I see, the more I question how much I've missed. And I actually don't want to wish my life away, but I can't wait to be talking to you hopefully next year as well, to say, and do you remember when we were talking about what we missed? Well, this is what I've discovered now.
Yeah. Yeah. And it is a process of discovery, isn't it? And I think as we evolve, we are discovering more and trying to understand dogs' needs better. And I think sort of what's been a light bulb for me is understanding that so many of the behaviors that we see in dogs are similar to what we see in humans. So many of those anxieties and compulsive or compulsions, fears, phobias, they're the same, or at least very similar. And so our dogs taking on all of these almost human like anxieties and stresses and fears and phobias and compulsions because they live in our environments, not because they're mimicking us or imitating us, but because of confinement and the fact that dogs out there, feral dogs that have the space to move around and make their own decisions, they might have certain fears because, of course, they have to keep themselves safe out there. But what about anxieties? Are there compulsions? I mean, you know, do you know what I'm trying to get at? In that
Absolutely.
it seems like dogs now, because they live with us, are taking on so much of our of what pollutes us, of what is toxic to us. It's becoming toxic to dogs as well. So even more, we need to be looking at our dogs' needs.
Yeah, absolutely. And choice for me is obviously really important, as it is for you, but we also have to recognize that dogs can only choose from the choices that we've made available to them. And that's why free work for me is just mind blowing. As I said, it's been created by dogs for dogs, and we start to see so many amazing patterns, including how a dog would actually probably prefer to greet a person, and certainly start that process of data gathering when they're in the company of unfamiliar people. And it's something that I'd noticed for years, and we are able to write this sequence down on the board when our students come in saying, we are probably going to be looking for this sequence. Not every dog will follow the exact same sequence, but in the years and years that I've been exploring the early start of free work, and free work as a more structured approach to canine learning with a dog at the center of that learning experience, the more we see a really clear pattern in dogs who might have been introduced by their caregiver as, oh, my dog loves people. My dog gets really excited around people. My dog's going to run up and jump all over all of you who are sitting watching. And do you know, in the thousands of dogs I've connected with around the world, one dog out of thousands has actually gone and engaged with the people, but that dog actually had quite high anxiety around people. So when we saw that, we switched the way we had created the free work layout and moved to an area where there was more space, therefore more choice, and put a barrier between us and the dog. And the look of relief on the dog's face, where there wasn't this pressure to engage with people in that dog space, was palpable. And that is one dog in thousands, because given a choice, dogs do not come up and jump up at us, sniff our hands. And yet it's something that we often try and modify as a greeting behavior in some of our dogs that we might be seeing as clients or maybe supporting in a shelter. But actually, if we're really mindful of the true greeting pattern that I've seen in a free work framework, those behaviors don't even start. So they aren't anything that we might need to change.
So you're saying that jumping up that we see is a product of their environment, and that given the choice, that they would rather indulge in something else or in a different way of greeting. Is that what you're saying? Yeah.
Yes. Because there's this, it's like watching a dance. And as I always say, people sometimes call me a dog expert, and I say I'm not a dog expert. The only dog experts that exist are the dogs themselves. And we're just here trying to help them integrate to our life and hopefully helping them find peace and helping to keep them safe and feel safe. When we sit back and have other options available to that dog that enable that dog to move and to be curious and to explore and start this beautiful dance with us at their pace, rather than us saying, oh, I've learned some really good things that can help you stay calm, keep 4 on the floor. If we just let the dog guide the dance or become the pilot of his own learning experiences, nearly every single dog has come into the free work setup, started to explore, and then they just start this really casual glance towards the people that are sitting watching. And this is the same whether we have 5 or 25 people observing the free work. And then they'll sort of explore the free work setup a little bit more. And then they start a glance towards and an air scent towards 2 or 3 people. You can see the direction that they're looking and air scenting in. Then they go back and find some more treats in some of the snuffle mats, or we do like amazing combination stations. We don't really often have just a single item. And then they start what I call the walk by, where they start to leave the free work area and they'll walk by 2 or 3 people that are observing. And then they go back to free work. And then they might come back and now scent the shoe of 1 or 2 people that they started the walk by first with. And then they might walk by 2 more people, go back to free work. It's rarely more than 2 or 3 people at a time. This sequence is glance towards, air scent look towards, walk by, shoe scent, 1 or both shoes of that person, walk by other people. And then they come back and do maybe the shoe again, but often the lower leg. And then they come and orientate themselves so they start scenting from the hip up the trunk. And then they come in front and they start air scenting towards our breath. And our breath has a unique signature, just like our fingertips. And this amazing sequence is something we have observed over and over again. Things that might change the order of that sequence would be dog doesn't feel emotionally comfortable, dog doesn't feel physically comfortable. Dog might have pain, poor gut health, other issues physically as well as emotionally that actually are interrupting the sense of smell, because that's really common in dogs that are uncomfortable in the body, highly stressed, a lot of body tension, and or aging. And again, that's observing the absence of patterns is as valuable as starting to recognize the patterns. I've also noticed that those dogs, when we're outside, will start that same sequence if more people join, even if we're in a different environment. And actually, when I'm outside and there are unfamiliar dogs, maybe like in a park, or I've gone to a shelter for the first time, the dogs start that sequence too. But what we do is we interrupt it, because that young dog, that slightly anxious dog, might just be gathering that air scenting towards us, gathering that data, and then don't be silly, come and say hello from a well-meaning guardian. Or if that dog does come and start that beautiful shoe scent sequence, we lean over. So we intimidate the dog and put pressure on the dog just by the change in our body posture, even if we have learned that we're not to put our hands out to touch a dog until that dog's a little bit more familiar. We're still interrupting that sequence, and we often just don't stand still. We often might, and we start verbalizing how good we are with dogs and what a gorgeous boy, because we naturally want that dog to feel safe with us. But we could be doing behaviors that actually have the complete opposite effect on that dog. And if dogs are really fearful, what they often do is actually start that sequence from behind. So I'll feel that nose when that dog's ready to approach on the heel of my shoe. Then I feel that nose scenting my calf and up the back of my thigh. And then I'll feel that little nose maybe on my pocket. Normally in 2 or 3 different engagement sessions. It's very rare the dog does that whole sequence all in one go. And I was just watching this beautiful pattern. And I watched it for years, Vicky, before I started to say, do you know what? I think there's a pattern, because I don't want to see something 2 or 3 times or in 5 or 6 dogs and go, hey, I've observed something. I want to just keep saying, is this a thing? And it's a thing. And I just am amazed at how we've missed it. I don't know how I've missed this, but also horrified that I will have taught at some point, I'm sure, written about it, shared it. Oh, just put your hand down, let the dog come and scent the back of your hand. It's not what they do. It's not what they do when they're given a choice. It really isn't.
So when we're teaching children, how to greet dogs, and like we obviously, let the dog come into your space. If the dog wants to, fine. If the dog doesn't, then that's fine too. So you're saying that actually extending a hand to this dog, like most people do, actually is not needed.
It's not needed. That's not my experience.
Yeah, I mean, that's, again, you see, that's a mind-blowing thing.
It's a mind-blowing thing.
There you go. I mean, and why?
Oh, sorry.
I think that's more for the person, isn't it? It's more for the person to have the connection. The dog's going to come and get your scent. If it wants to smell you, then it's going to come and get scent from, as you say, the shoes, from the lower part of your body. Yeah. But why are we extending our hands? That's for us.
I think
not
so.
For the dog.
The handshake, that's part of our culture, isn't it? So maybe it's a sort of softer version of a handshake for the dog from the human's perspective, but that's not how the dogs, in my experience, want to pick that data up. And I was in a shelter with a lovely young dog. We were in a paddock admiring this incredible setup, and this young spaniel came and jumped up at a caregiver who ruffled the spaniel's ears. And I said, do you mind if I start teaching already? I know we're just having a tour around the site. I said, let me help you. Let me just suggest that you just quietly take your hands away from this young dog. And the caregiver took her hands away, and the young dog put his feet on the floor, and then he picked something up in his mouth and he ran around. And I said, he needs to move. He needs to hold something in his mouth because there's 2 unfamiliar people in this space with him. And that high arousal would have maybe triggered him to jump up at you. But I would also suggest that it's a behavior that is being practiced because you have a natural drive to reach down and ruffle him. And that in itself can be quite disruptive to the dog's nervous system. So if we just start to watch him and see how he wants to pick up information and greet us, we might be able to support him in his learning by working with him in a way that actually meets his needs. And he put whatever it was down he'd had in his mouth. After that, I need to decompress. Came up, sniffed my shoes, sniffed my lower leg, moved away again. Then I think he did the same pattern to the second person who was unfamiliar to him. I can't remember. Or he may have just done this sort of walk by, and then he just went and sat at his caregiver's feet. And she was like, do I reward him now? Because he's doing this, offering this lovely behaviour that we've been working on. I said, you don't need to reward him. The behaviour is self-reinforcing. It's self-rewarding for him because we've taken the pressure off. We don't need to teach 4 on the floor, provided we don't trigger 4 off the floor through our own actions and reactions. And they were just like stunned. And it's quite a simple thing to teach, but it's a really hard thing to do. Do nothing. Just be. It's really hard because we're programmed to connect, to vocalize, to touch. That's part of us. That's who we are. That's how we show affection, how we tell someone they're heard, they're seen, how we communicate that same information to our dogs. But it can actually, in my experience now, trigger and reinforce some of the behaviours that means that dog may struggle further down the line.
I'm talking to Sarah Fisher. I'm going to take a quick break and then we'll be back. And I want to talk a little bit about anatomy and handling. A quick break here to get a word from this episode's sponsor, the Victoria Stewart Academy. Now, did you know that I have a school that teaches people to be dog trainers? I love It's Me or the Dog and my work as a dog trainer on television, but Those of you who know me know that my true passion really lies with helping other people live their best lives with dogs. And I love seeing that truly magical transformation when that light bulb goes off with someone I'm helping with their dog. That's what it's all about. It's the secret sauce that pet professionals like me, who work with these amazing animals, that's what we all share. It's what makes being a dog trainer the most rewarding and enriching job I can imagine. It's why I love what I do. And it's also why I founded the Victoria Stilwell Academy, so that I could provide a roadmap to others who want to help dogs and the people who love them learn to do what they love doing at the highest level, that is, to become professional dog trainers. Earning a living working with dogs professionally, it's been a dream of mine for years. And that passion is what drives all of us at VSA to create courses that are specially designed to help adult human learners chase their dreams. Now, most people already know about our flagship dog trainer course, which provides both online only and in-person options. But did you know that we also offer both dog guardians and future professionals a fully refundable 10-hour online course taught by me and other awesome VSA faculty, and it's called the Fundamentals of Dog Training and Behavior course. Now, I know it's not the sexiest name, but it's one of the most dynamic learning experiences available to dog geeks, and it's a pretty awesome first step to see if learning with VSA is right for you. Now, as a Positively Podcast listener, you can use promo code PODCAST right now to get the Fundamentals course for 50% off. That is $150 value. So, take our course. Plus, we also have a couple of free starter courses. They're free, completely free, including a course called Building Your Dog's Confidence, which reveals the secret ingredient to a happy dog life. So, I encourage you to check out VSA today. As I said, we have courses for all levels of learners. So it doesn't matter whether you're a newbie with your first puppy or a grizzled vet already making a living as a pet professional. Visit positively.com/VSA to learn more and enroll in a free course. That is positively.com/VSA. We all want the best for our dogs, whether that means you taking home some key tips for your own dogs or adding the ultimate in professional dog trainer education. Visit positively.com/VSA today. VSA, it is the future of dog training. And now, back to the podcast. I'm back with Sarah Fisher, and we're just, she's blowing our minds again, of course, like she always does. We've been talking about patterns of behavior, and do you really need to stick your hand out so a dog can smell it? Aren't they getting enough information? Just shouldn't we just let them do that in their own way? I'd like to pivot a little bit and talk about it's along the similar lines, but about handling and about, and I know that we've spoken about this before, but I do think we need to mention it again, in that so many behavioral problems that we say that are problems, certainly certain anxiety behavior or aggressive behavior can be, or the causation can be from pain, from discomfort. There's a lot of dogs that don't like being handled. I mean, I was with somebody the other day who he came round and was connecting with my dog Bella and stroking her, and I was like, she's just tolerating that. She actually doesn't want to be stroked like that. And then the person was like, well, no, I think she likes it. She likes me. I was like, no, I think she likes you. I think she's just tolerating that. I was like, just stop a second and let's just see what she does. Does she nuzzle you for some more? And didn't she just get up and walk away? I was like, yeah, see, there you go. She's just a dog because she's old. She's 15. She just doesn't like to be touched. She is very touch sensitive. There definitely is pain there. She definitely has arthritis. She's on medication, but it's still a little bit uncomfortable for her. She'd rather not be touched there. And so much of the time, we're just not listening to our dogs. What do you say to that? Well, I know what you're going to say to that, but I just want our listeners to hear what you have to say to that.
I think you're amazing. You're an amazing guardian. And what you said about asking the person who really wanted to connect with your dog to take her hands away is really important, because sometimes we keep going, doing anything, and the dog will stay there engaged with us, or, as you say, tolerating something until we stop. And that's been another thing that's been really evident in free work, that we've been able to really look at that tendency of the human to keep going, keep that engagement going for too long. Because when we have other bits of food available in free work and we start to introduce some valuable life skills within that framework of free work, or we might introduce an unfamiliar person, or we might start going through the steps to introducing dogs to being in a similar space with each other. Because we're not the only source of food, dogs often will do one, connect with that person, or two repetitions of whatever it is we might be starting to build into the framework of free work for building education. Then they might offer 3 repetitions. And in between, again, this beautiful dance of 1, 2, 3. They're going back to the free work layout and sniffing, or using their tongue, licking some paste, or just moving around the free work stations. And again, that really made me think about how, even if we think, oh, we'll only just ask dog to repeat something 5 times, or we'll teach this skill and we'll repeat that, and then we'll teach another skill for a bit of variety and we'll repeat that. Actually, when we can, again, give the dogs the choice, and we're not the only source of food, and that's the crucial part, there is this incredibly beautiful, unique, but commonly observed pattern in that learning style and that learning speed. And I think that ability to break everything down for our dogs has been so valuable, because what we've seen is actually what appears to be an increase in the speed of learning, and giving dogs a chance to explore different habits for themselves, because habits are a really normal and really important part of life. So lots of caregivers will come and say, oh, this is, they introduce their dog and I love him, and she's been with me for so many years and she's taught me everything. And the things that I, would like a little bit of support with are, maybe this dog chases wildlife, or is scanning the horizon all the time, or really disrupted if they see a particular breed of dog in the park, or get worried when they hear any dog bark. And what we see in free work is this change in the organisation of the posture, lengthening of the frame. We start to identify areas where we start to have a suspicion that dog may be really uncomfortable in the body. But even if we identify painful or potentially painful parts of the dog's body that warrant further investigation, within that free work session, we still see a reorganizing of that body, however old it is, in a more efficient way. And as we start to see this body find more freedom of movement, we start to see more freedom of thinking in terms of their responses, and they move beyond these reflexive behaviors to more considered thinking. So we have dogs that will leave the free work area, and we have 90 acres at the farm, and just stand on a loose lead, air scenting, and their guardians are crying because they have really struggled to meet their dog's needs, because their dog seems so fixated on hunting or watching for birds, let's say. And we haven't taught that dog any new skills. We've let the dog start to find that peaceful internal environment for himself with our support, and that learning then seems to continue into other environments, because the internal environment of that dog has started to change. And then from that, the guardian starts to recognize when that internal environment is starting to become more disrupted again. And maybe that head starts to rise, the ears start to rise, maybe the tail starts to tighten around the base of the tail. And I think as well, my big learning experiences over all these years have been really starting to observe and identify and recognize probably less obvious signs of discomfort. So it isn't that we are showing people how to spot a lame dog. It's starting to ask people to think more about patterns that they've observed and what those correlations might be. And that includes looking at the patterns in the dog's coat. So we'll start to see coat colour change, the coat become coarser or greasier, curlier or flatter, change colour over areas where there's been injury or where there's maybe restricted movement through the connective tissue. And that can be hugely illuminating too. And we have amazing vets that some are going through the courses, but others fully embrace their clients, setting up free work, videoing it, because they can see so much more as the movement slows and that animal starts to release tension. It's not possible to help dogs find that state of relaxation in a veterinary setting in a 15-minute appointment. It's not possible. So we've had, again, incredible discoveries by people finding that their dog had 8 lumbar vertebrae, not the more common 7. And that may be a reason why their dog had always been out of balance and therefore always needed to move. The dog didn't always need to move because he had high drive. The dog needed to move because chronic pain rewires the nervous system and kind of keeps the busy sympathetic nervous system engaged. So a lot of people that think dogs have got a high work ethic or high drive actually discover their dogs have high body tension, often linked to underlying chronic pain. And again, the more we can help people identify this, we're not vets, we're not diagnosing, but we can start saying, I just look at the pattern, that dog's right hind leg is always out to the side, or that dog's always collapsed on that same hip in sit, or that dog's left front paw is rotated outward. We start to help people become more aware as caregivers, and that enables them to find the right support. It's amazing, but it all comes again from slowing down.
I remember, and it was quite a few years ago now, so I forget exactly what was wrong with the dog, but when one of the police officers, the canine handlers that I was working with here in Gwinnett, actually in Lawrenceville, Georgia, his dog, a new dog that was being trained, and his lovely handler, well, the dog who lived with the family as well, that was probably about sort of 6 months, 7 months into the training. And here, police dogs aren't trained that well, actually, I have to say. That it's quite brutal. But with my guys, they were much more into having a relationship with dogs, seeing them less as a tool, more as a companion, more as... but obviously, these dogs had a job to do. And so this dog had started to growl when being touched. And of course, being in a family as well with younger children, and it's also a working police dog, that the handler was very concerned. And I was like, yeah, I think there's something more. I think there's some issue. I want you to get an x-ray done, and I want to show Sarah Fisher. And I also want you to do a video of the dog walking away from the camera and the dog walking to the camera. And you correctly, which of course I have to say had been missed by the vet, you correctly said or saw some kind, and again, I've forgotten where it was, but some sensitivity in the dog's body. Dog was put on some kind of pain medication and the growling stopped. And I think the handler was shocked that it was that something that was thought to be a behavioral problem, or the dog being naughty or nasty or aggressive. It wasn't that at all. We're not blaming the dog. Actually, the dog was saying, I'm uncomfortable. That's painful to me. And that dog is still in service.
Yes.
and didn't growl anymore when being touched, Sarah. So that's just one
Well done, Vicky.
example of the dogs you've helped. And when you were talking about that high drive, that working dogs, those dogs that are for their job have to be, that a lot of these police dogs especially don't have time just to come down. They're always on it, even when they're being played with. They're always like running after the Kong real fast, or, you know, jumping up and getting this and doing it. There's no real calmness. And that's when I was like, yeah, I know. I have good friends. We'll see you right. We'll see you right, Sarah. You really helped in that, and you've helped thousands of
I
dogs.
remember that video well. Yeah, I think it was the right hind, if I remember correctly. But you're right about that sort of belief system around, you know, they have to stay alert and engaged. And I'm very, very lucky. I work with police dogs. I have an amazingly progressive police force near me. And I had the great fortune to meet an amazing guy called Dennis McCoy. He's become a really valued, hopefully lifelong friend. And it is about saying, okay, well, of course, there's times when the dog might be deployed and the dog is going to be on high alert, but that doesn't mean he has to be in a state of high tension. And it doesn't mean he has to stay in that state of high tension, because then we're actually starting to create more problems with that internal environment that's going to impact on how that dog digests his food, how that dog learns, how that dog rests and catches up on really meaningful sleep, how that dog responds to other disruptions in that external environment, such as noise. And the free work for these dogs is amazing to say, what are their preferences before they go into more exhilarating activities like bite work, and how long does it take these dogs to come down after that exhilarating engagement, and how can we then take a mini version of what we've seen out, so when that dog is out working, we can help him reset and recover. And I work with border force dogs, and I've worked with military dogs, and being able to explain to people, okay, so you have a pattern to the start of your working day. For me, it's up at 5:30. Henry doesn't get up till much later. I'll drink coffee. Then I'll start caretaking maybe some of the other animals. I have got a really common routine. If it doesn't happen, if I have to, go without coffee, it's not the end of the world for me. So my routine can be quite flexible, but I have that build up to my working day, and I have the same type of sequence at the end. There's a sequence to when we feed the donkeys and get maybe the Shetland pony in if it's raining, and Henry has his final meal of the day. There's a very clear pattern to then what I might do: watch the news, I might catch up with social media. Where is that start and end of a working day for our companions, particularly if they're engaged in high impact, high energy work? So I kind of explain free work as this little pot of coffee before they work, and then maybe their glass of wine, or sitting reading the paper, or doing a crossword, or catching up with the news, whatever it is that we do to start winding down from our day. Because we don't work and then come straight home and fall into bed. Unless we're really exhausted, then of course we might. But if we're going to be that exhausted, we're not going to be able to maintain that for too long, because it means that there's something significant happening in our day-to-day work that isn't allowing us to do this sort of work, decompress, work, decompress, work, decompress, which is a natural part of our 24-hour cycle. We need to recognize that for our companions too. So as well, when we're observing like really busy times for our dogs, they all have a naturally busy time. That isn't the time when it's going to be beneficial for that dog to learn how to relax by our side, or to maybe sit and watch the world go by, if we're trying to give that dog that experience during what is a natural busy time of day for that dog. Henry's busy time was always 1 till 3. Then we had another foster, Hendrix, who I think shared some of his photographs in the DBC talk last year. His busy time was 3 to 5 p.m. So again, we're going to find these times, and we're going to flex and build in those learning layers at the right time, and at the right pace for each individual dog, depending on their learning preferences, not what schedule we're setting, not what timetable we might have written. And I think, for me, it's the dogs in shelters that have taught me the absolute most. And it's all that learning that I can take into other environments when I'm connecting with different dogs and different caregivers. And I've been supporting a shelter abroad. We did a sort of 4-week program, and they were working with this dog who'd been in their care all through adolescence, young bull breed. We know how overwhelming the shelters are for lots of dogs, but particularly sensitive bull breeds. And it was amazing. So I said, okay, we're just gonna look at the postural pattern, just gonna watch. And so he was engaging in quite aroused behaviours around people, zero aggression, but just highly aroused, highly frustrated patterns. So I just started to get them to change, not have the water bowl on the floor, put that in a raised stand or get a raised water bowl. Start raising all the enrichment items so we can create free work layouts from the items that he enjoys that were at a more appropriate height for him and not reinforcing a posture that he would also adopt when he was displaying frustration and anxiety. And within 4 weeks, there was such a phenomenal change in the way this dog was coping with the shelter environment, that instead of running at the fence line to bark at visitors, he'd just walk with this beautiful wave in his body and be like, let me gather some important data before going back to free work. And he was actually rehomed. And that to me is just amazing. This dog's been there months and months and months, something like 14 months, through really challenging time in a dog's life, adolescence. And the feedback as well was not only how beneficial it was for these amazing dogs that these caregivers were supporting, but having that time just to observe and be and have these peaceful connections without any attachment to outcome had been so beneficial for the care teams too, because they were moving beyond training plans, protocols, rigid time frames. They just started to watch more and do less, and it was really beneficial for their nervous systems too. And I feel lucky that we have the platform to share this information. And a lot of that, Vicky, is down to you, because, like I said, you are so generous in the bringing together of people to share information that's going to benefit dogs and everyone that loves them.
Well, thank you. I mean, yeah, the same goes for you. It's your life's work, isn't it? And it's wonderful work. It can be frustrating, it can be upsetting at times, but it's an exploration. And I think we've been on a journey of discovery for years and years and years.
Yeah.
And so that's why, you are going to be talking about the title of your talk at the conference is Patterns, Habit, and Familiarity. And I think through this podcast, I think people have got a better idea of it. But I would say for you guys that haven't registered yet, then do register. dogbehaviorconference.com. The conference is April the 21st to the 23rd. Once you register and all the presentations have gone out live over those 3 days, if you can't attend all of them live, that's absolutely fine, because you get access to all of these presentations for a year afterwards. And so you're going to learn an absolute ton. And that's why, Sarah, we have you back every year, because there's always new information. There's always this process of discovery that you share with us. And this is why we're doing it. We're trying to change dogs' lives positively, and we're trying to help people, guardians, understand the amazing beings that they have in their homes. That's why we do it. I want to thank you so much for joining me on the podcast today. I'm so excited you're speaking, and thank you for all the work you do.
Thank you, Vicky. It's always a pleasure. Thank you.
If people want to find out more about ACE and free work and everything, where would they go? And if they want to do a course, where would they go?
Tilley Farm, TILLEY farm.org.uk is our website. And ACE Connections is our Facebook group. And it's a really lovely supportive group. You can put videos up as well, questions about free work, put videos up of your dog, moving in free work, or even out on a walk saying, is there anything that you think I might need to do to support my dog further? So it's a really kind, supportive group. And it's a very peaceful group to be in as well. So do join that and we can support you there.
Thank you so much, Sarah. Well, guys, I hope you've enjoyed the podcast today. It has been really informative. I've learned something even today as well. You know, every single time I listen to Sarah talk, it just inspires me. And I think that's what the conference does as well. It's really inspiration. Even for us behavior professionals that have been around the block a few times, it's still inspirational. And that's why, you know, I'm excited about it. So I hope that you can join us. Thanks, everybody, for listening to the podcast. And I'll see you next week. Take care.
Thanks for tuning in to Victoria Stilwell's Positively podcast. For Victoria's online dog training courses, more information, and helpful dog training tips, visit her official website at positively.com. Become a professional dog trainer with the Victoria Stilwell Academy at vsdogtrainingacademy.com. Get connected on Facebook, Instagram, and other social media as Victoria Stilwell, and follow her on Twitter at Victoria S. Be sure to tune in next time as Victoria helps you and your dog live your best life together. Positively.